Hello and welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode of Siasa Talks, the only place where we meet to discuss political situations. We get scenarios happening around in the political arena and try to give a political interpretation of the same in the larger picture of the political destiny of this country. I trust it's been a beautiful week and you're all keeping safe. This week, there has been a lot of happenings in the political space. The ouster of the Deputy Speaker of the National Senate, Professor Kithure Kindiki, has rocked the headlines and has propagated lots of discussions in the entire public space. But before we delve into that, let's look into a story that I would like to share and we see how it is related to this event. In the Greek mythology of Helen of Troy, Helen was a very beautiful woman who was a seductress of her time. And Helen was married to the king of Sparta by the name Menelaus. And Menelaus invited for a banquet the king of Troy, Priam. The king of Troy visited in the company of his two sons, Hector and Paris. Paris was known to be a young man of great courage, and he was a seduction in his own right. So during the partying and all that eating and the ceremonies around the visit, Paris met with the king's wife, Helen, and they both fell in love with one another. And they planned overnight how Helen was going to elope with Paris to the kingdom of Troy. And that indeed happened. And that action of Helen eloping with Paris is what sparked the big war between the kingdom of Sparta and the kingdom of Troy. So the Trojans were strong and they fought the Spartans terribly and almost defeated them. So Menelaus invoked the assistance of the great warrior of the time, Achilles. And Achilles was recruited into the army of Sparta to fight against the Trojans. And the Trojans were beaten by the single hand of Achilles. Achilles managed to kill the elder son of King Priam, Hector. And he dragged his body with the horses into their camp and kept the body. But one interesting thing that happened in this tale is that King Priam, the king of Troy, as strong as Troy was, but when his firstborn son Hector, who was the heir apparent to the throne, was killed, King Priam broke down terribly. He cried, he wept. And in the wee of the night, he walked himself into the camp of the Spartan army and sought audience with the most dreaded soldier, Achilles. He fell into the arms of Achilles and knelt on the ground and begged Achilles to allow him get his son's body and proceed to have a decent burial for his son. Achilles agreed to this, and Hector was taken back to Troy and buried among the heroes of Troy. What does this tale have to do with all this that is happening? We can see that Deputy President William Ruto is a beaten man, just like King Priam was. And at this point, it was only sensible for William Ruto to calm down, humble himself and go back to the king and tell the king, well, you have dealt with me, but have mercy upon me. We expected that William Ruto would backtrack in his steps and ask for a truce between him and the President Uhuru Kenyatta. But that is not what William Ruto has done. He has continued with the onslaught. And you remember just the other day, after the ouster of Professor Kithure Kindiki as the Deputy Speaker in the Senate, that same evening, William Ruto was seen donating goods in Kiambu County, the bucket of the president. So all these things that William Ruto is doing is trying to show the king that I am as good as you are, or perhaps I am even more loved by your people than you are, and I cannot fear you anymore. We are equal. This is a terrible mistake that William Ruto is doing, because the thing is, when the king decides to crush you, he will crush you completely. And that brings us to another point. What was the end game in the changes that we are seeing in the two houses, both the National Assembly and the Senate? What was the end game in impeaching or removing or replacing Senator Kithure Kindiki? The end game in all this is impeachment of Dr. William Ruto. We may not forget to speak about the larger Rift Valley region and where they will find themselves if this comes around. Where will the larger Rift Valley find themselves? People have looked at Gideon Moi, the senator for Baringo, in very different ways, and many have said he's a slow politician, he's not aggressive, he's not as popular as William Ruto is. But I beg to differ, and I will tell you this. Gideon Moi has taken the position that he was in at this time. As the senator for Baringo, there is nothing vocal you should hear from him. But this next dispensation we are going into, you will experience and you will see a very different Gideon Moi. Just like one Morade said, from 2017, we're going to see a more ruthless Uhuru Kenyatta, a different Uhuru Kenyatta, a strong and robust Uhuru Kenyatta. We thought it was just words, but then we are seeing this happening right now. The same thing applies for Senator Gideon Moi. The moment has come for him to rise, and he will rise without looking back. He will rise without blinking. In the next few months, there's going to be a lot of campaigns and a lot of events to elevate the position of Gideon Moi within Rift Valley. There's going to be a lot of campaigning for him in the underground. There's going to be a lot of profiling for him, and by the end of this year, his profile will have risen tremendously. You can only be seen to be playing low there and quiet when the moment has not come. But Gideon Moi's star has reached the moment it is rising, and people are going to experience a different Gideon Moi. This game plan has been played perfectly and it is complete. So we are going into a very different phase where the unlikely will become the likely. There has been conversations about ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi and the few guests he has been receiving at his Musalia Mudavadi Foundation offices. We have seen people like Mandago visit his office. We have seen people like Honorable Waluke visit his office. And it is clear that Musalia Mudavadi is gravitating towards a coalition with William Ruto. But what position will such a coalition leave him in? Will he command respect in that coalition? Is that coalition worth the while? And what prevents him from going into a different coalition but sticking to this one of William Ruto? But if history is anything to learn from, we have learned over time that Musalia Mudavadi is the man that will craft any political alliance even at the 11th hour. And where you think he is not where he is, and where he is not where he isn't. So for the people from Deputy President's camp who are approaching him for a possible coalition, they must put that into consideration, that Musalia Mudavadi may not be predictable as many think. And this has happened over time, and we have seen this happen in his life, in his political life. But then let's look at the eventuality of him going into a coalition with Deputy President William Ruto. What will that kind of coalition be like? What fortunes will it bring forth for him and even the region? In my opinion, a coalition with Musalia Mudavadi going into one with Deputy President Ruto will be dead on arrival. It will be an investment in the wilderness. And in my opinion, Musalia Mudavadi would have done much to align himself with a coalition that is not getting a lot of beating already, because you cannot already join a weak side, a side that has been weakened every day and night. It's been beaten and beaten all through and the beating is still going on, and then you join. When you join such a coalition, you probably become collateral damage. So for me, in my opinion, I would think it is time for Musalia Mudavadi to step back and give a clear look at where he's actually headed and see if the political capital allows that, then he can proceed, because it is not really in our right to determine where and who pairs with who. But this period is going to see a lot of such coalitions. Others are going to begin and break as soon as they began. Others are going to come through in the next few months and in the remaining 1 year or so before the election. So there's going to be a whole operational space in the political arena, and a busy one for that matter. A few days ago, Raila Odinga met with women leaders in Nairobi, in his office in Nairobi. And after that, he gave communication that the BBI was in its final stages. So what do we learn from this progress? And just like earlier on we had said on Siasa Talk, that as this COVID-19 pandemic is making people to work from home and isolate and stay calm in the whole political space is keeping quiet, there was a lot of works that were going on in the background. And this is a clear indication that the BBI works have been going on in the background. It is very clear the train has left the station and there is no stopping. But let's ask ourselves, is the BBI going to take the referendum route, or is it going to take the parliamentary route? With the current changes that we have seen in the parliament, it is highly likely that the BBI changes will go through parliament, unlike a referendum avenue. And the referendum avenue must have been beaten because of the COVID-19 scenario and how the public will receive the entire news of the government sponsoring a very large exercise that is money intensive at the expense of the suffering that is going on. So this splits our opinion on the changes that have been happening in the parliament and in the Senate. Are these changes to pave way for the BBI and give a clear say for the BBI? Or number two, are these changes supposed to lead to the impeachment of one Deputy President, William Ruto? So we will continue seeing how this churns out in the course of the day, and we will tell for sure what was the overall intention or what was the end game in all this. If you like these conversations, and perhaps you're coming through for the very first time, remember to hit the subscribe button immediately so that you may not be left behind in future broadcasts of the same. Click the like button, you can leave a comment, and also remember to click the notification bell. Till next time, goodbye.